I've been lucky enough to own some of the coolest cars, and sometimes I can't believe when I go down the list of stuff I've owned that I've actually had the pleasure of owning them. Some of them were disappointments, some of them were shockingly better than I expected. So we're going to go through the ownership. I'm going to share with you which ones were the most meaningful to me, which ones were the most disappointing, which ones surprised me the most, and overall, which ones were my favorite. I have to start with the 2012 Ford Raptor. And I know it's not a supercar, it's not as cool as the thing sitting behind me. It does have a little sentimental value for me because it was my best friend and business partner's truck. He unfortunately got sick and passed away. The person in charge of his estate was kind enough to let me purchase it, and I've owned it ever since. I've done a few upgrades, suspension, wheels, a tune. Overall, though, it just reminds me of my friend every time I get to drive it. It is the first nice car that I think I have really purchased in my adult life. I've owned some previously. I had a Dodge SRT10. I don't really talk about that one because I purchased it horribly. I put myself upside down in it, paid too much, and couldn't ultimately afford the payments. I did have a 62 Continental before that, but again, had no business owning a car that needed that much money to get it worked on and that kind of stuff. So I've owned those. They're nice. I'm starting this with me purchasing cars the right way and not over leveraging myself to put me and my family in jeopardy of not being able to pay for them or having to make tough decisions, which previously in my life I did have to do. Moving on from that, my one and only time I'll lease a car, 2016 Jag F-Type R. I wasn't sure about Jag and the reliability, so my plan was always to lease it. If it made it through the lease, I would buy it out and own it. I understand that there's a little money lost there, but I also thought there was a chance the car would crap out on me and it would somehow save me headaches later on. I did make mistakes. Overall, the car is spectacular. It's still one of my favorite sounding V8s ever. I might end up with another one sometime. I bought a 87 Grand National. My wife called it a hoopty. I poured far too much money into that, upgrading the brakes and suspension and lowering it and beefing up the turbo and the entire engine, tuning it. I put a lot of money into it. Ultimately, it was one of those that I loved when I was a little kid. They were such a cool looking car to me when I was a kid, but if my wife doesn't really want to ride around in it with me, I don't get the same enjoyment I get out of it because I like sharing my stuff. And she likes driving the cars as much as me, and if she didn't like it, didn't work out, got out of it, had a good time while I owned it. I had a 2009 Aston Martin DBS. That was the first supercar I owned. I was absolutely terrified. So I did not drive that car or really truly get to enjoy that car as much as I should have. It was a manual transmission. It was silver. It was beautiful. Still one of the prettiest cars I've ever owned. I was afraid of it as far as maintenance and repair costs went. So I didn't get to enjoy it as much as I wanted. I made a horrible choice ultimately at the end of the day. And I traded it and got a Lamborghini 2005 Lamborghini Gallardo. I had maybe 6 months. I am too tall for it. I am too wide for it. It was gated. I got a great deal on it, but it was not the right car to go from the DBS, taking basically a step back to the Lamborghini. But Lamborghini was my dream car as a kid. I thought it was going to be spectacular. I did enjoy it. The second day, though, the slave cylinder went out. It was a big expense. Luckily for me, the dealer did split the expense with me, so it was only half as expensive. Like I said, I had it for about 6 months, and then I went and bought an R8 instead, V10, gated, and that car drove so much better. I owned that car for about 3 years, sold it to a friend. He got to enjoy it for another year, and then he ended up selling it. It was a spectacular car. It was so much fun to drive, so easy to drive. Like always, I wanted to move up, found something better, and ended up selling it. I bought an E60 M5, which had a V10. It was a problematic V10, but one of the greatest sounding cars out there. It had a single clutch, a lot like an Aventador, so it has that punch to it. My friend Adam has the nicest one I've ever seen. I still want to buy it. Adam, if you're selling it, let me know. I want yours because it was way better than mine. Mine ended up having problems, blew up the engine, ended up selling it for too little, but hopefully whoever I sold it to is rebuilding it like they had a plan to do, and it's back on the road. It was a great car. It fit the whole family. It was fast. Pretty sure still to this day it is the only M5 that goes 200 miles an hour from the factory. I liked motorcycles, still like motorcycles. I just choose not to ride them here because drivers are so insane. I had a Triumph Speed Triple R. It was such a fun bike to ride. I have a West Coast chopper, like custom motorcycle. It's extremely hard to ride. It was, again, like the Raptor, it was my best friend and business partner, Adams. He left it to me when he passed away. So, again, something I have that I don't ever ride. Too hard to ride. I've ridden it before, and it breaks almost every time I ride it, and it's just too much work to actually keep it running. For our family car, my wife's car, we did have a Navigator. I didn't like it. It was very I say it was like a boat. The suspension was very soft. She liked it. I didn't. Eventually, we did just sell it. We got the F90 M5. 2019, brand new. Possibly the best car as far as my excitement, my love for it that I owned. Bought it new. There might be something to that. I love the interior color. It was like orange and black, two-tone. I actually really started posting heavy on YouTube with it because I really just wanted to share it. When we bought it, it was kind of a fun handover. I eventually will probably get another one. Sounded cool. It was so fast. At the time, it fit the family. And just overall, it was a really fun time owning it. I did take a hit, though, when I sold it. The depreciation on an M car is something serious. That one was one of my favorite cars I've ever owned. Most likely was my favorite family car that we've owned. So I did sell the R8 to my friend Todd, who got to enjoy it. When I sold that, I went and bought one of the new Acura NSXs. It was in a really cool red. It was a really good, even though it was a V6, it was a really good car. It was fast enough, it was exotic enough, it was different, nobody knew what it was. It was a really cool, fun ownership experience. Very heavy Honda inside with plastic, and like Jag, the R8, and the NSX were her favorite three cars we've owned. Drove them all the time. Yes, she knows how to drive stick. Loved it. She wants to get another R8 manual because she misses that so much, and we miss driving a manual that much that we've been looking. Haven't pulled the trigger. We haven't decided if we want to go that route or maybe an older car I could start to work on and upgrade myself, do a build on, something like that. But the NSX was a really nice car. It made its way to Florida with this here. It was one of the few cars we actually brought along with Tesla Model S. The girls absolutely loved that car. They thought it was the coolest car. We wrapped it in this like Tiffany blue color because at the time I owned the wrap shop, so everything had to be wrapped. It didn't make sense to not have wraps on your cars if you're owning and trying to get people you know or other people to get their stuff wrapped. There's a whole other story. We'll go into the businesses I've owned and why I do or do not still own them. But it was a fun car, like I said, but it's a lot like an iPhone where not only in price, it depreciates as the new ones come out with new options that one doesn't have. It's a piece of technology. It's an A to B car. If that's what you're looking for, I think you should get a Tesla. I know they're getting a lot of heat right now. They're great, great cars if all you're looking for is A to B. Spectacular. I think they're the best electric car out there. I still own two for work vehicles, Model Ys. I think they do everything and save so much on maintenance. I had that when I brought the truck. I brought the M5, the F90 M5, the E60, like I said, blew up. And those are the ones I brought with me. That's all the California cars I owned. Now we're getting to Florida. Oh, I did miss one. When I sold the Grand National, I actually traded it for a Mustang, just straight up, because I thought I knew more people. My brother really likes Mustangs. I knew more people had more of a network of Mustang owners, so I traded it for the super custom Mustang, which if you're not a Mustang person, you're going to think it was a horrible trade. It was, in the Mustang world, a very famous Mustang. So I bought it, and I eventually did sell it to somebody, I think it was in Alabama or something. So my plan did work. Figured I'd add it real quick. But then, okay, we get here, and like I said, the Tesla I got bored of. I should not even have brought it here. I should have just sold it off because I paid to get it here, paid to register it here, all that stuff, and then immediately sold it. I bought a Trackhawk. I didn't just buy a regular Trackhawk with the Hellcat motor. I went and bought one that was built and tuned, and it made about 800 to the wheels, 800 horsepower. It did not last very long. I loved it. It was loud, and it was fast, and it was obnoxious, and it did fit the whole family. But with I have three daughters, and they all have to sit in the second row, so As they get older, that becomes more and more problematic. They're touching me type of silly stuff. My wife didn't like it. And again, like with the Grand National, I like to share my enjoyment of the cars with my family, so she doesn't like it, I don't want it. Doesn't matter how much I think it's cool or whatever, she just didn't. It smelled like exhaust. It smelled like exhaust all the time because of how much it was tuned and the like straight pipes and everything. It did. It smelled like exhaust all the time, and I don't blame her for not wanting to be in a car. This smells like exhaust all the time. It was very short-lived, and I went and traded it in and got my very first McLaren, my 600 LT. And that car was a mental game changer for me because that was such a step up from anything I had previously owned. It was, I remember, like I do with this, coming out in the garage just staring at it and looking at it and finding all the cool little things about it. I went to the dealership for a 720. It was sitting next, the 600 LT was sitting next to a 720, and just, it looked better. It looked more aggressive. The exhaust coming out the top, shoots flames from the factory, had the Senna seats, which ultimately were its downfall for me because they hugged more than these ones. These ones, they're like bigger, and the 600s just really like hugged me. And I didn't fit in the car well, but I hadn't learned at that time to not sacrifice my comfort for the want of something. I have to realize I'm 6'4". I don't fit in everything. So as much as I would have loved to have a Huracan at some point, I don't fit. And I've tried and tried and tried. Don't fit. I didn't learn that. This car was the final lesson for that because I couldn't have picked a better car, except I didn't fit in it. My head was pretty much touching the roof. My shoulders were too wide. Fit where I was like, it was a great car. It was amazing. It was a mental game changer step up for me that motivating more things are possible car. Why did I get rid of the F90 M5? As my kids grew, they got taller. They got my height. And what was happening was when they would get in the seat behind me, even though it was a four-door, they started like hitting me a lot and like constantly hitting it to where I would scoot up and I'd give up a little bit of my legroom and a little bit of my legroom. So they were uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable. It's when I really decided that we had to get family cars versus all fun cars. And so as much as it pained me, it made sense to go get rid of it. Between the E60 and the F90 M5, they really made me like BMW a ton. So we went to the BMW dealership and I bought what's possibly the last new car I would ever buy. So I took the hit on the M5, traded it in, and I bought a BMW X7 M50i. 3 rows, everybody had their own spot. For me, it was a big deal. The second row had captain chairs, but no center console, so they could easily get through to that third row. Everyone had their own area, and it was still 500 plus horsepower. Had a decent sounding exhaust system, V8. Had some, the drive modes that made it fun, not the M modes, but the Sport Plus. I thought it would be okay. But as we started driving it and I really settled into its daily driving, for me, a problem happened. And that problem is it felt like the Navigator boat again. And I don't know what it is. Like the soft suspension like that, I hate the way it feels on the road. You hit a bump and you just feel like you're going overweight. It didn't last long either. Right after we bought that, while we still had that, you can't really see it much, we bought our golf cart, which we still have. It is one of the funnest but very South Florida things to own. Anywhere that the speed limit is 35 miles an hour or slower, we take it a lot. We've put more miles on it than we probably have any other car. Multiple cars combined. We drive it all over the place. It is just a really cool, fun, open air. Kind of gives me the vibe of a motorcycle freedom feeling, but a little bit slower, a little bit, I don't want to say safer, but safer. And the whole family can go. It sits 6 people. And the girls like to listen to the music. The wind blows. It's beautiful weather here. We live in paradise most of the time. So it's one of the funnest cars to own, or vehicles to own. We got that right after the X7. As I said, the 600 LT kind of elevated my thinking into realizing I was in the next level of vehicles. And I traded that in and the NSX in, even though my wife didn't want to, and bought an Aventador. Doors go up, V12 Lamborghini. I thought it was the pinnacle. I was never going to want anything else. This was the car I've wanted my whole life. It's Lamborghini, my childhood love. It sounds amazing. Still to this day, I say it's the best sounding V12 with like the F12 right behind it. But I know a lot of people say the Mercy, and like, for some reason the Aventador to me, maybe it is because I owned it, but to me driving it wasn't for me. It was the most disappointing car I've owned. I went from 600 LT thinking like this just shows me how much more is possible and motivating me to do more, be better, to grow, elevated my goals. I went to the Aventador and I was like, it became a chore to drive, to where sometimes I would take something else. And if your dream car is so much work for you that you're taking another vehicle instead because you're like, oh, we're going to be in traffic and I don't want to be in traffic in this, it was disappointing. The car's amazing. If you want one and you're okay with the single clutch and the little herky-jerky through traffic and not really turning great, don't regret making the decision. But if I had to do it again, I would not do it. I would have kept the other two cars until something better presented itself. But I would never have known that if I did not do it. So Aventador did not last long. And I had it right at peak pricing during the COVID weirdness of used cars. So I just straight sold it to the people I bought it from. This was possibly the weirdest deal I made. So I sold the Aventador. I made them take the BMW X7 and the little bit of negative I had into that. I got a $6,000 check and a BMW Alpina B7 in Java green, which from the research I did, there was 3, possibly 2 in the world. The interior was white. It was a beautiful car. I love the way it looked, and unfortunately that car killed BMW in my mind because the engine imploded. The best we could tell is a blade from the turbo sucked up into the engine, had a party, destroyed it. I sent it to a shop who made promises they couldn't fulfill, jerked me around, hid the car. Ultimately it was an insurance claim and I got about half of what I paid for it back. It was a rough one. While I had the Alpina before it broke, I bought a 720. I need the bigger one with more interior room, and I did buy it the wrong time. I didn't think I did because these had just come out, and so historically previous to that, the way McLaren's pricing depreciation worked is they have different upgrades. They come out with the coupe, then they come out with the Spider, then they come out with the LT, and then the original coupes values have dropped as far as they're going to drop, and then they kind of just stayed. I mean, they dipped and raised based off everything. The LTs had been out, the Spider LTs just came out, so there was nothing else I thought that was going to make them depreciate more. So I bought one, and then almost immediately McLaren announced the 750, which was just a better version of the 720, and it made it drop more. I owned it about a year and a half. It was a spectacular car. Right now, best bang for the buck, I would go buy another one because the pricing is adjusted properly. Bad luck. It happens. I made tons of money on the Aventador. I have made money on other cars. Broke even on a bunch of them, which is my goal, is to break even. Like, buy and sell it for the same, and really all it cost me was insurance. Like I said, I bought a couple of work Tesla Model Ys. They're perfect for work. Because the Alpina issues, we didn't have a great family car. We found a G-Wagon. It was a white one. It was nice. I went and bought it cash because as this whole thing's progressing, I'm getting more and more tired of car payments, so I was like, I don't want car payments. We went and bought the G-Wagon cash. It was a cool car. I didn't get in the back seat ever. It was another one where I knew I could get in and out of it without really losing money. The new ones had just come out. People weren't super stoked about them being the electric version and everything like that, so they kind of settled in price, and so we drove it for a while until I let my friend drive it, and I got in the back seat, and I'm like, I basically got the M5 again for back seat room. Didn't last a ton because, again, I'm buying cars for me, not my whole family, so I actually sat down and I looked at what I own, and the recent few, I don't want to say missteps, but like poor decisions I had made with vehicles, and I realized I was not practicing some of the things that I teach in my mentorship and coaching and stuff like that, which is delayed gratification and setting goals to reach and that kind of stuff. I realized how much I hated car payments, and so I was about even at that point after about the 1.5 year mark in the McLaren. So I was going to sell it private party, set it up for consignment at the McLaren dealership. And I, again, paid cash and I bought an Aston Martin Vantage. I think it was a 2020. It was a really fun, again, sounded so good. That AMG V8 grumbled. It was rowdy. It was, again, it was a go-kart feeling. And it was the only car I've ever been in that when I sat in it with where the hood stuff, it made me feel like a regular sized person with the visibility and stuff, and versus being too tall in all the cars and like having the top cut off and stuff. So it was a really good car for me in that aspect, and it was really fun. My 720 didn't sell, so I just went and I'm like, you know what, I'll take it back, I'll enjoy it. So I had both cars for a little bit. The Vantage was always supposed to replace the 720, and like I said, I started doing some soul searching and decided, let's get the family vehicle that the whole family wants. So I went and I said it needs to be 3 rows. I asked my wife what it needed. She's something that felt the size it was for her driving to be able to confidently and competently drive around in traffic. The Cadillac Escalade V, but the markups on those at the time were like $60,000, so it wasn't a true option. And the Dodge Durango SRT Hellcat, because there were 3 rows. Guess who had a Dodge Durango SRT Hellcat? McLaren dealership. So we go look at it, sold them the G-Wagon. We were getting the Durango and like a $40,000 check. It was a great deal. While we were there, they had a Lotus Blue 765 LT on their showroom, and I was like, man, this thing's nice. I need one of these at some point. Maybe eventually, you know, once I sell the 720 and I've had enough time with the Aston Martin, maybe we'll move into that. But $500,000, like, that's a lot of money. It's all right. Did the deal. I forgot the title for the G-Wagon because it was kind of, we didn't expect to like the Durango as much as we did. We expected the interior to be worse and that kind of stuff. The Durango is the most surprising car I've owned. It is neck and neck with the M5 for me. We have to, like, I've only owned it for a little over a year, so we need to, like, give it some more time to make sure it holds up. But right now, it and the F90 M5 are my favorite 2 cars. And the kids fit. And I have room. And it has pretty much everything we need. I can do work in it if I have to go do something like that. It's great all around. When I took back the title, they did a proposal for me on the 765 LT. I guess they had someone that happened to have just called and looked for my exact color 720 in the price range I was looking for. So they bought me out of it, which was my plan going private party anyway. They gave me a pretty good deal, even though I just bought the Aston Martin. I lost a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, for the Vantage, and they got me into this. I am in this really good, and this is the best car I've ever owned. It's the most exciting. 765 LT is where we're at now. So I have the Durango, the 765 LT, I have the golf cart, and I have the Raptor. Favorite car ever. Most enjoyable is probably the golf cart. The never getting rid of is the Raptor. Durango's best family car. Disappointing was the Aventador. I wish I would have had more time with were both Aston Martins. The ones that changed how I look at things. First Lamborghini Gallardo 600 LT, because I have to make better decisions and not be so impulsive because I liked everything about it but the seats. That's the cars I've owned. That's where we're at now. Who knows what the future holds, but I'm really, really happy with all the stuff I've owned up to this point. So there's a chance I don't upgrade for a while. I always say that there's something new around the corner. I love everything new Aston's doing, so there's a high likelihood I really get into one of those again. But it would have to be like someone makes me an offer on this I can't refuse. I sell it, and then I just get something in the meantime until I can replace the best car ever made. It is next video. We're going over the year ownership review on this, and I'll get into everything, but that's it. That is all the cars I've owned. If you have any questions on any of them or want to know more information about any of them, what I did to them exhaust-wise, wheels-wise, anything, drop it in the comments below. If at all possible, hit subscribe. About 90% of the people who watch my stuff don't subscribe. It's free for you, helps me a ton, and keeps me motivated to keep making these. But with that, I'll see you on the next one.